It looks like the first ever NASCAR German-owned team will be making its debut sometime in 2022. And Denny Hamlin says on his Stat Companies podcast that 2311 Racing would like to span on the long term, but it have to make financial sense. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go off start out paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Noah Gregson's 2022 Chevy accessory scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at Michigan. Very solid scheme in my honest opinion. Love that Chevy accessory has been sponsored this year, of course, really helped out college racing. I will also see it on Landon Castle's Xfinity Series car in Michigan. This one looks really good, and I'm definitely looking forward to see it on the racetrack this weekend at Michigan. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Williams' 2022 General Formulations alloy scheme we're going to see this weekend at Michigan. I think we've seen a scheme very similar to this, where Alloy and General Formations have to kind of swap, with General Formations basically taking a majority of it this time. It looks pretty good in my opinion, and hopefully we'll see Josh have a good run in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeremy Clement's 2022 Kevin Whitaker Dale Sr. Tribute Scheme we're going to be seeing next weekend at Watkins, 2 weekends from now, at Watkins Glen. I love that we're seeing the Kevin Whitaker schemes. Jeremy Clement's had a lot of Dale Earnhardt or even 1980s sponsored throwbacks. I think this one looks really great, looks awesome, and I'm excited to see his tribute scheme on the racetrack in a couple weekends at Watkins Glen. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kevin Harvick's 2022 Bushel of Busch scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Michigan. It's very similar to the Busch Red Apple schemes that we've seen so far this year. The only difference, I think, is a bushel of Busch on the car, but it looks really good. I've been a big fan of the Busch Red Apple schemes we've seen so far. It looks pretty good, in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Spencer Boyd's 2022 WWL Demolition and Contracting scheme they're going to be seeing, I believe, next weekend at Richmond. Pretty good looking scheme in my opinion. I love the orange on the truck. It's my favorite thing about it, and I'm glad to see Spencer Boyd has a new sponsor for the event. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2022 Kroger Plus Health Sweet Leaf scheme that I believe we're going to see this weekend at Michigan. Pretty solid looking scheme in my opinion, but also there's been some schemes that JTG's had this year just haven't been great. But this one is a decent one in my opinion. I'm glad to see her changing some things up on this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sammy Smith's 2022 Pilot scheme we'll be seeing this weekend at Michigan. This gives me very similar vibes to old Michael and Nat schemes that he used to run and Josh Ray ran last year. I really love this. I think did a great job on it. I'm excited to see it on the racetrack this weekend at Michigan. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2022 Keen Parts / Corvette Parts Autism Awareness scheme we're going to see this weekend at Michigan. I absolutely love this paint scheme. They did an amazing job on it. It's very colorful, very awesome, and it looks amazing in my honest opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's official 2022 Worldwide Express scheme they're going to see this weekend at Michigan. This, of course, is the official debut of this car. We've seen previews of it, but this is the official debut. This looks amazing in my opinion. No doubt about it. It looks great. It's simplistic, but also very creative. And, of course, Kyle Sykes makes great paint schemes, and this one looks really awesome, in my honest opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Grant Enfinger's 2022 Sure-Done scheme they'll be seeing next weekend in the Richmond Playoff Truck Race. I love this paint scheme. I love the auto parts for kids 4 less is stepping up as well. I love the yellow number. I love the colors on it. It looks awesome, looks incredible, and I'm excited to see on the racetrack here next weekend at Richmond in the Truck Race. And the final paint scheme we were taking a look at is Akin Regatta's 2022 Mooney scheme that I believe we're going to be seeing this weekend at Michigan. Holy crap, this is amazing. I love the Moonies is stepping up and basically sponsoring the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, I should say, for the first time in many years. This looks amazing, looks really awesome, and I'm looking forward to definitely seeing on the racetrack here this weekend at Michigan. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Autos Owners. As Auto Owners announced yesterday, they'll be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing sponsor Mark Truex Jr. in 2023. Auto Owners has been sponsoring Mark Truex Jr., I believe, since 2015 or 2016. They've had a long-term commitment and a long-term partnership with Martin Truex Jr. So it's amazing to see if they're going to be returning. I think the reason that they didn't announce till now is because they didn't know if Martin Truex Jr. was going to be back or not. Glad to see Auto Owners has a major commitment and happy that they will continue to sponsor Martin Truex Jr. in 2023. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about Michigan. And we're going to talk about the purse money for this weekend at Michigan. So, for the Cup Series race, it'd be $7,125,085. And for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, it'll be $1,269,941. Decent purses, in my opinion. Of course, the Cup Series always has major purses because of all the charter money, so that's why the purse money is out there. And that's going to be the purse money for the upcoming Michigan race that we're going to see. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Homestead Miami Speedway. As Homestead Miami Speedway revealed a new logo, and I have to say this gives me Miami Vice vibes. This looks absolutely incredible what they did with this logo. It's just very colorful. It looks amazing. And Homestead Miami definitely has a really nice looking logo. I think it looks awesome. Really, really great. And I'm definitely looking forward to the race. I think it's awesome and it looks great, in my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Eli Gold. As it was announced a couple days ago that Eli Gold is unfortunately going to be sidelined due to health issues. And of course, he currently commentates for Alabama football games. For many of you who do not know, who are kind of newer NASCAR fans, Eli Gold was a NASCAR commentator, I believe, for TNN and TBS back in the day in the late 1990s and the early 1990s as well, up until 2000, where he also did some commentary for NBC back, I think, 2001. I think he did one race with Ned Jarrett at Memphis in 2001. Had a really, really great call back in 2001. Eli Gold is such a legend of the sport. It's a shame what has happened to him, and I'm wishing the best of luck. And Eli, please get well soon. Hopefully we'll see you back, but I'm not sure. We'll see what happens. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about some people that unfortunately passed away. As last couple days, two legendary independent drivers in the world of NASCAR unfortunately passed away. Buddy Arrington, who scored, I think, 103 top 10s, which is some of the highest numbers for people who never scored Cup victories. One of the original independent drivers, one of the last great independent drivers in racing. He unfortunately passed away. And also Neil Castles, another driver who won the Grand National East Championship back in 1973. He also unfortunately passed away yesterday as well. My prayers and condolences do go out to the families at this time. It's very, very sad and very, very depressing. My prayers and condolences do go out to the families at this time. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Michigan International Speedway. As according to Adam Stern, as he put out yesterday, Michigan Speedway has sold out its infield camping for the first time since 2012. This is absolutely huge. For the first time in 10 years, they've sold their camping out. One, I think it's because they've only had one race for the last couple of years. But secondly, I think another big factor is, one, I think a lot of people are really intrigued about this race, and they want to see these next-gen cars are going to race. Because let's be honest, this track really over the last 10 years, because they haven't repaved the track in 10 years. The reason that it's just racing hasn't been good, and the reason for that is because the track repaved, it basically aged and hasn't really aged at all. So as smooth as it could be 10 years down the line. So I think people are really intrigued to see how the next-gen car is going to race this weekend. It could race good, but we're not entirely sure yet. So we'll wait and see what happens. But they have made some, hopefully the next-gen car can race better. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the NASCAR racing experience. As was put out on, I believe, yesterday, the NASCAR racing experience is going to allow fans to drive on the Phoenix track during championship weekend, and it'll be on the track before the racing begins during the weekend. The NASCAR racing experience, which has been around for many, many years, is having a really cool initiative, and I have to say that this initiative, in my opinion, is very, very awesome and really, really great to see. I think this is awesome that they're allowing fans to get on the racetrack. I think that's something that's really, really important, and getting that fan activation is something that's really, really important. So in my honest opinion, I think this is awesome to see. Really great to see for sure. And again, really cool to see the NASCAR racing experience is getting involved in that. I think that's really awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now, a good friend of mine, Casey Campbell, put out the people that will be on the broadcast for the Cup Series race and also Xfinity Series race. But for the Cup Series race, for the second time this year, Dale Jr. is going to be doing play-by-play for the Cup Series race this weekend at Michigan. Of course, Dale Jr. has already done play-by-play earlier this year at New Hampshire. Now, I want to give my opinion on Dale Jr. doing play-by-play. I think Dale Jr. did a fine job, but I honestly would love to have just a regular play-by-play commentator do the regular commentary. But I will give NBC props on one thing. I love that they are changing things up. We're not afraid to change things up during the season, and I love they're giving Dale Jr. an opportunity. They have said that they're planning to do basically multiple times of this, so I'm glad that they're going to try this out again. I'd love to see what Dale Jr. can do. Rick Allen will commentate the Xfinity Series race, by the way. Also, Brad Doherty is going to be part of the booth, which I think is really exciting because he brings a lot of insightful nature for sure, and we'll see what happens, but pretty cool to see that they've got Dale Jr. pumped to play-by-play, but I think he should kind of more focus on being the color commentators. I think he's one of the best guys who's not the play-by-play, in my opinion, but I think he'll do a solid job. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Ferrari. As according to Adam Stern, Ferrari's disasters on pit road have been the top topic during the F1 races on Twitter. Of course, everyone talks about Ferrari and their major disasters. What am I talking about? Well, Ferrari has been always, in the last couple weeks, has really been the hot shot over the last couple weeks because they have made so many mistakes on pit road. You go back to the week prior to the Pras race in France. Carlos Sainz had a shot to win, and they make a terrible strategy call and bring him down pit road. Last weekend at Hungary, which we don't have F1 for a couple weeks. Last weekend at Hungary, they had the race locked up with a potential 1-2 finish. Guess what they do? Terrible strategy call, but Leclerc on hard tires, which it really did not work, and they've been making so many mistakes and dropped it completely out of the championship now, with now them being 80 points back, and now Mercedes is starting to close in on Ferrari in the championship right now. Ferrari's got to get their stuff together. Of course, I believe that Matteo Bonatti basically said, we don't need to make any changes. It's like, you guys probably need to make changes because your team isn't doing so hot right now. That being said, though, it's crazy to see that Ferrari's the top topic because, again, they've had so many mistakes made on pit road and they made so many issues and they got things that they absolutely need to fix. So they need to fix these issues for sure. But it's good to see at least we're getting some engagement during there. But a lot of people have been critical of them, and I think it's justifiably so, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Graham Rahal. Now, Adam Stern put out a report. We talked about this already, but there's a lot of talk about a potential street course race in Pittsburgh if the Chicago race goes really well for NASCAR. Well, Graham Rahal, basically, who has not really seems like a big fan of NASCAR, he basically it was put out on Wednesday. He says that I felt strongly that a race down near Heinz Field would be a tremendous race to hold an IndyCar race. NASCAR, I know people think it's bigger, better, whatever. I don't know that it works in Pittsburgh. This is a very, very big hot take in my opinion. I know that basically Chip Ganassi Racing, and Chip Ganassi, I believe, is from Pittsburgh. So I think IndyCar would be great to race in the Pittsburgh area. But I also love to see IndyCar race on an oval. It all seems like Graham Rahal is not a major NASCAR fan. Seems like a little jealous because he's never had an opportunity to race in NASCAR. But I can understand where Graham Rahal is coming from. Again, I think IndyCar would put on a better show than NASCAR, in my honest opinion, because we've seen some pretty good IndyCar races on street courses. But again, street course racing in general is not the greatest thing. But I understand that NASCAR and all these other sports want to make moves into the city. You need to bring the product to the fans, and I think that is the most important thing. And it's crazy that Graham Rahal's calling out NASCAR, but again, it's not a major surprise or coincidence that he's kind of calling it out. It seems like he's done that. It's not the first time he's done it, and it's not the most surprising thing in my opinion. But again, I would love to see, don't get me wrong, I would love to see IndyCar go there. And if Chicago falls through, here's the thing. If Chicago falls through, you get a backup plan, but again, I think it would be too much planning, and it really depends on how the election goes. Something we're going to have to watch. But I will say that I would love to see IndyCar race in Pittsburgh. I think it would be awesome, but I would also love to see IndyCar go back to Pocono. But again, they can race in both areas. Pittsburgh's 4 hours from Pocono. It's not officially in that market. It's kind of close to the Cleveland market, but then, again, you have Berkeley-Fort Airport and Mid-Ohio kind of close to that. So if you go to Pittsburgh, you're probably going to lose the race in Mid-Ohio most likely. Just like basically IMSA series lost Mid-Ohio for next year to go to Indy. So that's something that's really interesting for sure. Kind of crazy in my opinion, but at the same token, at the same time, I would love maybe see a street race for IndyCar at Pittsburgh, but we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Alexander Rossi. Now, of course, in the IndyCar race, Alexander Rossi picked up his first win in IndyCar in 3 years. Well, there actually have been some implications that come out on Wednesday, as it was reported by Nathan Brown and multiple people that Alexander Rossi has been penalized for being underweight in post-race in the car. When they did the tech, they said when they came back, and Jay Fry said this, when they actually got back to the victory lane, they said it actually with all the requirements it passed, but in the areas when they took out the water bottle, it ended up failing. How much underweight was he? He was 0.8 pounds underweight on the car. Now, would have that made up 3 seconds? I don't know. I think it made up a little bit of time, but don't think it would have made up 3 seconds on the racetrack overall. So I'm not really sure if that would have been played a major factor. Now, a lot of people are asking, like NASCAR, if you fail post-race inspection, you lose a race. Why does it not happen in IndyCar? Well, generally in IndyCar history, we haven't seen a lot of drivers really fail post-race tech. And by the way, it doesn't take 3 or 4 days nowadays for post-race tech to go through. Because remember, the IndyCar race was on Saturday. This is Wednesday when this was announced. So it was almost a full week before they really announced it. And that's why NASCAR moved this up. I like seeing them get the tech done before. But generally, unlike NASCAR, IndyCar never really takes away wins. Sometimes it ends up going to court, which I don't see this really going to court. But I think it's kind of interesting that people bring this up. Now, like I said, it seems like Alexander Rossi cannot catch a break for the last 2 or 3 years. But the good news is for Alexander Rossi fans is he will actually be able to keep the win. So at least that's a positive and a good thing right there, that he's not going to lose the wins. So overall, that's at least a positive. But it's a shame that a penalty had to come up. But it is what it is, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Felix Rosenqvist. Now, there was an article put out by Racer.com. It seems like silly season is about to get very silly. Because in that article, I believe that was written up by Marshall Pruitt, it says in the article that Felix Rosenqvist might not even be under contract with McLaren and might have signed a fake contract with McLaren for 2023 and might not be returning to McLaren heading into next year. This is different than what we all thought, because remember, we all thought that Felix Rosenqvist was officially signed a contract extension to drive for McLaren for next year. But it seems like it's very possible that Felix may not even be driving for McLaren heading into next year, which I find really interesting. So it seems like McLaren continues to be in the news in every aspect possible. We got more around them, by the way, later in the video. So, speaking of which, where do I think Felix Rosenqvist is going to end up? Well, if he's not returning to McLaren, possibly Rail Lerman-Lanigan. There's a lot of talk that Rail could be having a third car again next year. The rumors that maybe Graham might be stepping out. There's rumors of that. I've also heard maybe he'd be going to another organization like a Dale Coyne Racing, perhaps. That could be an option for him. But I really don't know at this point. But Felix, over the last weeks, is really performing extremely well. And I really think that if he goes to a new team, he's only going to improve in an organization. So I really love this. I would love for him to have a good ride. It's a shame it's kind of come to this, but it is what it is. But I hope they're able to find a way to get him a ride heading into next year. I really hope he's able to find a ride for 2023, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Alex Albon. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that Alex Albon is going to be returning to Williams Racing in 2023 to drive the 23 car, and he has signed a multi-year contract extension to continue driving for the team for multiple years. Alex Albon put on a joke basically talking about the Oscar Piastri incident and basically saying, yep, I'm officially confirmed, and said, I have confirmed that the contract talks are true, and I'm officially returning back to the team. Alex Albon, of course, has been driving for Williams so far this year, made his Formula One return, and Alex Albon has been doing really good so far in 2022. He's had a couple races where he scored points and has outscored Nicholas Latifi so far in the 2020 season by a wide stretch and a wide margin. I think Alex Albon is only going to continue to improve the Williams organization. I think they've actually been faster this year compared to last year. I don't think they're the worst team this year. At least he's not the worst team. Probably Nicholas Latifi's probably the worst team. But I do believe that Alex Albon really has been doing the best he can out there. And I've been really impressed with Alex Albon this year when he's driven for Williams. And I think this is a well-deserved contract extension, in my opinion, with the Williams organization. He's done a really solid job, an amazing job. And I'm very happy to see that Alex Albon is officially coming back to Williams Racing for 2023. And I think he'll do a really good job with the team, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Rinus VeeKay. As it was announced yesterday that Rinus VeeKay has signed a multi-year contract extension to stay with Ed Carpenter Racing starting in 2023 and will continue driving for the team for multiple seasons. Rinus VeeKay has been driving for Ed Carpenter Racing for the last couple years, but he had been one of the drivers that a couple teams were targeting. First one was Aaron McLaren SP. They were one of the favorites to potentially get him for next year. And then also Chip Ganassi Racing was one of the favorites to potentially get into the 10 car as well if Alex Palou does not return. Rinus VeeKay is a very talented driver, but I love this move for a couple reasons. Don't get me wrong, I think that Ed Carpenter Racing is not as good as Chip Ganassi Racing or even Aaron McLaren SP. But I think staying with your team and really staying with your team, I think makes a lot of sense. So I really do like the fact that they're keeping him there and keeping him in the organization. And Ed Carpenter Racing really likes Rinus VeeKay. They're big fans of him. He's won for the organization, has been solidly competitive. Has he won this year yet? No, but he's been close to winning this year. So I think that they want to keep that stability. Because again, right now they're also looking to keep Connor Daly heading in the next year, which I think is a positive thing. There's been a lot of talk that he potentially could be a free agent at the end of this year. But I really love that they're keeping Rinus VeeKay in this organization. I think having a driver with a lot of experience makes a ton of sense, and I'm glad to see it looks like they're going to be keeping Rinus VeeKay heading into next season. He's a really solid driver, really, really good. And again, I think he's only going to make this team stronger. He's only 21 years old, and he's the longest tenured driver at the team. Talk about that for a minute, that a driver 21 years old is younger than me is basically, still racing. So that's really crazy in my opinion, and I'm very happy to see Rinus VeeKay has signed a multi-year contract extension with the organization heading into next season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Mosak. As it was announced on Wednesday that Connor Mosak is going to drive the 26 for Sam Hunt Racing in a couple weekends at Watkins Glen. This will be Connor Mosak's second attempt in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Of course, his first race came earlier this year at Portland, where he led laps in the race, but did not go on to get the victory. I think he had finishing in top 10, if I'm not mistaken, but he will be driving the 26 for Sam Hunt Racing. I love this move, in my opinion, because Connor Mosak, while yes, he's really driving for the Brett Holmes Racing organization, Connor Mosak, in my opinion, is a very, very talented driver. He's really done really good so far in ARCA. He's outperformed the equipment this year. I don't think the Brett Holmes Racing equipment this year is as good as it used to be. And I do think that Connor Mosak is a really solid and a really, really gifted driver. Now, what are my expectations? I don't expect them to win. I think Sam Hunt Racing has outside capabilities of winning, but I don't see them winning. I think that Connor Mosak will potentially get a top 5 or even a top 10. I think that's really the goal that should be for him going into the race. But I love that Connor Mosak is racing Xfinity. I think a top 10 is very, very possible and very doable in my opinion. I'm really happy to see Connor Mosak will be driving the 26 for Sam Hunt Racing here at Watkins Glen in a couple weekends. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mark Rushbrook. Now, we haven't really talked a lot about this really throughout the year, but Ford has had a lot of struggles this year. And a lot of people assume that basically is due to the Ford nose tweaks they made on the car before the beginning of the season. Well, Mark Rushbrook basically came out and basically said no. He says that the Ford struggles have come in a variety of areas and doesn't think that the preseason tweak to the nose is the source. He also said in the interview that says it's unacceptable they've only scored 4 wins so far in the 2022 season. But when you look at Ford's performances at certain types of tracks like Gateway and Richmond and other areas, they perform really, really well. And even on super speedways, they perform really, really well. But generally compared to the Toyotas and even the Chevys this year, they are not as good as those other two organizations. Now, why could this be? Well, I think that there are areas in the car that could be a factor perhaps. But again, they say the car really isn't a factor. But I think there's a lot more talent really right now at Toyota and Chevy. I think Chevy really is a big factor of this. You look at that major combination of ECR and Hendrick basically had a couple years ago. I think that's played a factor where I've seen more Chevy brands up front as well. But I also do think that they just are lagging behind. Now, I also think that somebody seems taking a step back. Now, we're seeing performances like Kevin Harvick, he's improving. We've seen Cindric win this year. We've seen Blaney win this year. Not Blaney, but Logano win this year. Well, Blaney, of course, won the All-Star race. But Ford has things that they do need to work on when it comes to areas. Their highest driver in points, though, is Ryan Blaney, who's in the top 5 in points, so that's solid. But outside of that, Logano's the highest after that, around 8th or 9th. You got to go back a little bit to find the next 4 driver, Kevin Harvick, 11 or 12 for regular season points. So they're struggling a little bit, but not terrible. But they're going to have to work on this to improve going into the playoffs. That's one thing I think they'll definitely have to work on is getting better before the playoffs. So hopefully they're able to do that, and hopefully they're able to improve before the playoffs start and can improve heading into the playoffs. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Oscar Piastri. Now, we've been talking about Oscar Piastri over the last couple of days because Oscar Piastri was in the news a couple of days ago and was talking about the Oscar Piastri was actually supposed to be going to Alpine, and then he said he was not. Well, according to Adam Stern and multiple sources, he reported an article from RacingNews365.com saying that Oscar Piastri is officially going to be replacing Daniel Ricciardo at McLaren in 2023, and an announcement is pending really, really soon. Now, holy crap, there's a couple things to really take him from this. Number one, this, in my opinion, is a really, really strong move to put Oscar Piastri in the car, and I'll explain why. Oscar Piastri has been extremely good junior racing driver. He won the championship last year, and has just been doing so good in racing. And he absolutely deserves this promotion, in my honest opinion. And I think if there's anybody that really deserves an opportunity at this ride, I think Piastri deserves it. Second thing, you have two young drivers that have really worked together very, very well. Lando Norris, I think, is a really underrated driver. He's done really good over there. He's got a really good fan base and brings a lot of attention. He sits in the top 10 in points. He's outperformed Daniel Ricciardo by a large margin this year and has had points contended for the podium. And they've shown a lot more pace and speed over the last couple weeks, especially with Lando Norris. Now, getting into the other part, what happens with Daniel Ricciardo? Well, Daniel Ricciardo probably out at McLaren altogether. There's some that think he could go to IndyCar. There's also a lot who basically think that he's probably going to be out at the team. So a lot of questions are that he may go to Alpine, go to Haas. Some people like Marcus Ericsson think he's actually going to end up going to Haas next year, which I could absolutely see that. I can see him going to Haas heading into next season. Now, going back to Piastri, I love this young combination. If it ends up being official, I think this is going to be a really deadly and a really big combination, a really strong combination. So, I really love this, and it looks like Piastri's going there. And Ricciardo just hasn't had the performance. I'm sorry, he just hasn't had the overall performance to really back it up. So, I'm really happy to see for sure that he's probably going there, and good to see for sure, in my honest and sincere opinion, that he's expected to go there, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Larson. Now, we've talked about the story a couple times on the channel, really one time. It is really around a situation with Kyle Larson. On Sunday, there was a very, very nasty and scary wreck. Kyle Larson potentially had something going wrong with the car and basically had an issue and ran into Ty Dillon. Now, we all thought that it was a brake problem. Well, Hendrick Motorsports came out and basically said, no, it was not a brake problem, and he said Kyle Larson made a mistake on the racetrack, which really didn't make any sense at the time because we all thought there was something wrong with the car. One thing also to be noted is that he already had suffered damage from Eric on the roll, so he already had damage on the right front of the car, which is where the brake failures ended up happening. Well, we got some S&T data, someone actually from Reddit, I think Chasing Penguins, I think is the guy's name if I'm not mistaken, leaked some data from NASCAR to show the braking patterns. And if you look at the braking patterns that you already seen, the braking patterns just don't add up and they don't make any sense to me because the previous lap, they're extremely consistent compared to this lap where something is messed up. Now, could this be driver error? It's very, very possible this could be driver error, but again, I don't see Kyle Larson making that major of a mistake, especially that major mistake. That would be a very, very bad mistake for a defending champion to make. What I'm thinking happened, a lot of people are theorizing here, is what a lot of people think is that the brakes boiled up. A lot of people assume that the brakes ended up boiling up, and that's what ended up happening to cause this problem. Now, do I think that Kyle Larson knew about this and tried to skirt away to get involved and basically avoid a wreck? I think it's very, very possible. I think Larson knew something was wrong with the car and tried to basically get away before something serious could really, really happen. Now, do I think absolutely Kyle Larson, again, because some people thought it was intentional, it really, really wasn't. But something is not adding up here. Do I think that Hendrick may be hiding something? It's very possible. Hendrick could be hiding something. NASCAR could be hiding something. But I don't really think they're really hiding anything. NASCAR isn't. But again, Hendrick is going to basically say one thing. There's a lot of talk. Maybe we're going to get more penalties out. Who really knows at this point? But I just find it so crazy to see this story. We're still talking about this right now. And I will see if Kyle Larson says. One thing is like Kyle Larson didn't even speak to the media after the incident and basically was whisked away by Hendrick Motorsports saying, I got to go talk to my team. Something's not adding up here. And I want to know more. And again, this S&T data is always not the greatest thing to look at. The brake patch in NBC is so much different. It's just, he said he had no pedal. It's weird. It's crazy and chaotic. And just, this is one of the wildest stories we've probably seen so far this year. And just a very, very chaotic situation, in my opinion. And I'm glad to see both are okay at least. And nothing really serious and no scary situation really came from that. It was scary, but not like to the point where someone got seriously hurt. So at least someone got hurt in that situation. But man, just a very scary situation. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode. And we're once again talking about Kurt Busch. As for the third straight race in a row, Kurt Busch is once again will not be racing this weekend. He'll be once again out of the 45 car once again at Michigan. And once again, Ty Gibbs is going to substitute for Kurt Busch for the third weekend in a row. The big reason is because Kurt Busch has been on concussion protocols. For those who do not remember, Kurt Busch was involved in a wreck in qualifying for the Cup Series race. In final round of qualifying that Kurt actually advanced to, he backed into the outside wall with 25 G's of force and backed into the outside wall. First of all, my first thing I want to know is that Kurt Busch, my concerns basically is I hope he gets back to the track very, really soon, but I'm glad he's taking the precautions to get better. Another thing is I think Michigan, being how high speed of a track it is, I think it's a good thing they basically have gone ahead and played it safe for Kurt so that he can improve and get back to the track like Richard, because he wants to be back at Richmond. In the statement you read, he basically wants to be back at the track by Richmond, which I hopefully he can be back, but again, we really don't know. But there are a couple questions that need to be talked about. First of all, what happens if Kurt Busch does stay out for a lot longer than this? What if Kurt Busch doesn't get back for the playoffs? Does NASCAR get rid of their waiver? Did they get rid of the waiver that he has? Because right now he has the waiver and there's no issues right there. But do they drop the waiver for him and give the playoff spot to a guy like Kevin Harvick or someone who's right below Kevin Harvick and give it to them? Do they end up doing that? Because I think that's a really honest question that needs to be answered. Will NASCAR give a waiver to a driver like Kevin Harvick? That's one thing to watch. The second thing that needs to be talked about is what happens to Kurt Busch. Does he retire earlier? Who really knows? Concussion is something that's really different and is something in the brain. And you really don't know how long Kurt Busch is probably going to race at this point after. And will he come back to being as good as he was before? Because Kurt Busch was still really, really solid before the concussions. He is 44 years old. He's a lot older of a driver. So he's been in this series a long time. He's been in this series for over 20 years. And he's had a lot of success. So I want to see Kurt Busch get back healthy, and I hope he's as good, but I don't know. But getting back to Ty Gibbs, going to him for the third race, more experience for him, the better I think he's going to be when he does eventually go full-time Cup racing, which could very well happen as early as next year. Whether it's in the 45 car or the 18 car, I think there's a good chance Ty Gibbs could be racing a Cup. I think the goal is just to continue to get more experience. I think a top 20 would be still really solid, but I think it's a top 10. That would be really, really impressive. But once again, for the third race in a row, Kurt Busch is out, and NASCAR does need to continue to look at safety, but I do expect the NASCAR will be looking to continue working on that safety going forward. And now we're going into on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR's silly season. Now, Jordan Bianchi basically about a bunch of silly season rumors in the article, and I went in and read the article on all the major points that need to be brought up when it comes to this silly season. Now, these are all the drivers that are currently major players left in the silly season currently. Let's start off with Kyle Busch. If Kyle Busch is not to return to Joe Gibbs Racing heading into next year, because they're still having issues, they're trying to get him back at Joe Gibbs Racing, and they're trying to get contract talks done. But if Kyle Busch does not return to Joe Gibbs Racing, the two potential likely places he goes to are Stewart-Haas Racing or Kaulig Racing. Now, in the article, Jordan Bianchi mentions that Matt Kaulig was spoken to by the athletic spokespeople, and he says that right now that they've not had conversations with Kyle Busch. Both those teams be solid teams to go to. Stewart-Haas Racing, Kevin Harvick, of course, definitely willing to work with Kyle Busch, and I think Kyle Busch would help really build those programs up. So that's the first driver. Next, you have Aric Almirola. Now, originally, we all thought Aric Almirola was going to be retiring, but in the article, they mentioned that an SHR spokesperson has basically said that Aric Almirola is more than likely going to be returning full-time in 2023, and probably next year more likely to be his last year with the team, but he will probably be returning in 2023. Not a major surprise. I've already discussed it on the channel. It's one of the big headlines. He'll be returning to the team. Next, we have Noah Gragson. He's a favorite to go to 42. Not a surprise. Noah Gragson has been the favorite to go to the 42 car really since that was announced that Ty Dillon was going to be leaving about 2 or 3 weeks ago. That's not a major surprise to me. He'll be in the 42 car most likely. I know Gragson says he might want to return to Junior Motorsports, but he's a favorite to go to 42 car. Next, we have Cole Custer. If Kyle Busch does not return to Joe Gibbs Racing, Cole Custer's on the chopping block. He's rumored to maybe be going to Brickware Racing or maybe back down to the Xfinity Series at Stewart-Haas Racing or even SS Greenlight Racing. Though, no disrespect to Cole Custer, but Cole Custer, in my opinion, has not performed to the levels you're supposed to be in the Cup Series. So I'm not surprised that they're looking to potentially drop Cole Custer from the series. Again, I think Cole Custer's a decent driver in Xfinity. He's performed really good in Xfinity this year, but I think on the Cup side of things, he needs to really, really improve, and he hasn't done that. Tyler Reddick, going to him now. He's going to return to Rich Schultz Racing. David Wilson and Rich Schultz confirmed at Indy that he'll be returning to Rich Schultz Racing for 2023. So unless we see some major changes happen, we're not going to see any contract buyouts. He'll be back with Rich Schultz Racing. Next, we have Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is confirmed for 2023, but they're working on a multi-year contract extension that will go from 2024 for multiple years to get the sponsor set up for 2024. Bubba's performance really has been playing a factor into that. He's had 3 consecutive top 10s, which is the best of anybody in the field currently at the moment, and his performance has been doing really, really well. So Bubba Wallace is more likely going to return and have a contract extension long term. And then finally, Kurt Busch. They're saying retirement probably after 2023 at the latest, so next year probably will regardless be the last year for Kurt Busch, and then be working in 23XI Racing as one of the higher-up executives in the organization. This is all the silly season stuff that's going to be still a major play. There's possibly Kurt Busch retires earlier, but this is all the silly season stuff that's going on currently at the moment. A lot of chaos for sure heading into silly season. It's something that we're going to be watching for the next few months. Just a little mini silly season update for you guys to kind of get an update on really what is going on in the industry right now. And I do expect some major news and bombshells dropping here in the future. We're expecting an announcement for the 42 car in the near future. And if we're going to hear anything about Kyle Busch, it'll be soon. We need to hear something soon. But it's good to see that those things are happening. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about 23XI Racing. Now, Denny Hamlin has been on a media tour over the last couple of days. He's on the Door Bumper Clear podcast. Of course, that podcast that Brett Griffin, Freddie Kraft, and TJ Majors do. And he also was on the Stack of Pennies podcast with Corey LaJoie. And Corey LaJoie, and I believe someone else on the podcast, had asked Denny Hamlin about the possibility of some changes coming and thought, are they looking to potentially expand heading into 2023 or even in the near future? Denny Hamlin says that 23XI Racing does want to expand, but it has to make financial sense for him to go ahead and make that decision to make the call. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, first of all, he means by the financial sense of the business model. Denny Hamlin has been very outspoken and very vocal over the last year that the business model needs to change before they really make some major executive changes. They put a lot of things on hold. They put that shop on hold currently at the moment, and they also basically have put a halt on having a third car heading into next year. Now, is it very possible 23XI Racing could get a third car heading into 2023? It is very possible, but the only way it'd be very possible is for them to have a third car heading into 2023, even 2024, is probably going to be if they get a charter. And again, these charters are going up and they're costing a lot more. The rumored price for the charters currently at the moment right now, they're being rumored to be around $15 million for the next charter to be sold. And there's a few teams who are looking to potentially get in the charters. You know, Matt Collins in the running for another one. We know that Dale Jr. is trying to get one. We know that Denny Hamlin, he's trying to get another charter. Now, the only teams I think are probably going to be selling are Rick Ware and Spire. Spire Motorsports currently, they have 2 charters right now, and it's unclear if the 77 car is going to have a driver next year. That's unclear. We never usually find out about 77 cars until January, so it's later in the year. And then, of course, we do know right now if there's talk about Rick Ware maybe selling a charter. Rick Ware is always trying to find a way to sell money at this point. So that's very possible. Now, do I think 23XI Racing long-term they're going to expand? Yes, absolutely. I think they're going to expand to 3-car team. Denny Hamlin's been very outspoken that he liked to have a 3-car organization. No more than that. I don't think he wants to expand to 4 cars, but he'd love to expand to a 3-car operation. But like he mentioned on the podcast, he says it has to make financial sense for him to make the move. Now, obviously, when you look at Denny Hamlin, I think he's got a lot of money, and he's also got Michael Jordan. He definitely would be willing to make the move. But again, this car, it's going to eventually, the business model is going to change. And Denny Hamlin's been very outspoken about this too this week and said that they've had more conversations with NASCAR and has said that things are going in the right direction. They feel like the teams are going to get more of a fair shake. So I think that if Denny Hamlin feels confident, I think that he will eventually expand. We know that he's not planning to expand right now because they're getting the Cup program set up, so they're not expanding in that area currently at the moment. But I really would love to see 23XI Racing expand maybe going into 2024. As again, the only way I see him expanding in 2023 right now is to get Kyle Busch to ride if he doesn't return to Joe Gibbs Racing, which that would potentially be a possibility, but I'm not entirely sure if that even is going to happen. I really love, though, that 23XI Racing is talking about potential expansion. You look at the specs so far of 23XI and how much they've improved. I think that expanding to 3 cars will hurt their team as of now, so I think they got to continue to improve the 2 cars they currently have at the moment. But when you think of 23XI Racing, they're showing a lot of promise. They're finally showing that they're here. They're here to come to play, and they're showing a lot of improvement and progress this year on both drivers. Both cars have scored. Well, one has scored a victory. One's been very close to winning this year. And I do think that these teams have so much potential and so much to give here going into the future. So I really want to see it happen. Again, trust me, I really want to see 23XI Racing expand. and get more competitive cars. Because no disrespect teams like Spire, Rick Ware, I'd rather have 3 2311 racing cars than have 2 Rick Ware racing cars. And I love Rick Ware Racing. I love their organization. They follow me on Twitter, so I like them a lot. But I would rather honestly have 3 2311 racing cars. Just my opinion. I'd love to see 3 2311 racing cars in my honest opinions. But I'd love to see Rick Ware just also continue to improve their organization. Because I will say the 15 car this year, they've done good. 51 car, not as good. But we'll just wait and see what happens if they are potentially going to expand or not. So I'd love to see it happen, but we'll see if they go ahead and even try to do it. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about a new potential Cup Series team. Now, this team has kind of went under the radar, but this team put out a tweet on July 17th that they are going to be a new Cup Series team called 3F Racing. They're going to be a new NASCAR Cup Series team, and they're going to be the first German-based NASCAR Cup Series team that is owned by Dennis Hertz, and I believe another driver named Paul Windell, if I'm not mistaken, is the other person that is involved with this organization as well. I was really confused about this around this 3F Racing team, and I'm kind of shocked that they have kind of happened. But I did some digging and some research on this organization. I went to their website, and they do look legit. They have a car. What the plans from I've heard is they're going to be announcing their plans really soon. Now, the rumor currently at the moment now when it comes to 3F Racing is they have a potential, still looking for sponsorship. They have a developmental driver named Christopher Tate, who is looking to be a developmental driver for the organization, drives for Onions Motorsports in the late model scene. They're talking to him about it. And also, another major thing is, like I said, they have eStar engines backing up their organization. A couple other things that also need to be noted. They're looking to do 5 races in 2022. Then they're looking to do a 12 to 13 races in 2023 and eventually go full-time in 2024. It's also been noted that they're looking at having a 2-time Le Mans 24-hour winner and a current Cup Series driver, a current driver in NASCAR getting behind the wheel. Now let's talk about the current driver. The driver's name is Justin Allgaier. Why do I say Justin Allgaier? Well, one, it mentions in the rumor that Justin Allgaier is going to be the driver. Second thing, Justin Allgaier follows the account. And Justin Allgaier has been, no coincidence, I think he really does want to make some Cup Series starts. And I think he's a great driver to bring in to have some success with your organization. You look at stats of Justin Allgaier in Xfinity, and he had a decent run in Cup in a 77 car for Spire. And I don't think Junior Motorsports is going up to Cup full time, so why not go to 3F Racing and build their organization up and their 30 organization up? I think it definitely makes a ton of sense, and it's a great thing right there. Other drivers being rumored is Earl Bamber. Now, for a lot of you who do not know who Earl Bamber is, Earl Bamber has won the Le Mans 24 Hours, 2-time winner in the Le Mans 24, and I believe the DP, the higher-up class. But also, Earl Bamber has made a start in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for Richard Childress Racing. And he's been a very successful road course racer. So I do think that Earl Bamber will be a really good candidate to get behind the wheel of the car, especially on the road course at the Charles Roll, or maybe another race as well. Now, they will announce their plans in these plans here in the near future. They're probably going to make this announcement here in the coming weeks. They told me that in the coming weeks and months they're going to be announcing. I would anticipate it's probably going to be the last 5 races of the year. So sometime probably in early September, they're probably going to announce their major plans down the road. So there's got some big and exciting plans. Now, again, we have to, don't know, but I think they're a legitimate team. I love we got new teams coming into NASCAR. I think it's amazing we have new organizations coming in and new blood coming to sport. When you have new blood coming to sport and new teams, organizations come in, it's always a great thing to see. And you've seen a team like from Germany come in. We've got a Dutch-based race team. So why not a German-based race team come into racing? There's so many teams that have been so interested in getting into the sport. And we know Nice is interested going Cup. We've seen other teams like 2311 Racing, Trackhouse Racing, Live Fast Motorsports come in, College Racing come in. So many teams that come in over the last couple of years because they see even Team Stange is looking to make some starts in Cup with Tarso Bouquet, though we don't know if they're even going to show up or not. Of course, you have other organizations that are having a tough time getting in right now. They're still working on some stuff and approval to get into the sport. But I just love the fact that one is more diversity. And it will bring German fans from Germany who see this team, who have touring experience, by the way. It seems like a legit organization who manages a brand over there. You love seeing new organizations, and that's one thing I love with this next-gen car. It's supposed to kind of eventually even out the playing field. Are costs going to be high for teams coming in? Yes, absolutely, but we're seeing more and more teams wanting to come in and wanting to show up even going into next year. And the more teams we get, I think the better it's going to be. But it also doesn't mean we get more charters down the road, and some of these teams do buy up charters. That's a big question. Are some of these higher up teams going to really want it? I don't know if they're going to really want it. That's one thing I really don't know about, if they're really going to want this kind of money not to come in. But one thing I will say is I love the fact that there's a new potential Cup Series team that is going to be racing in 2022. I love the fact that we got a new Cup team, the first ever German-based NASCAR team. I think it's amazing for sure. Again, it's so cool to see that so many different things have happened. Since such a crazy moments over the last couple of weeks, it's so tough to trust anything at this moment. I had contact with the team, which is great to see, by the way. And again, if they are coming in, I hope they really show up. I would love seeing new blood. Hope it happens. And I'm happy to see it looks like we got a new Cup team. I want to see them come in. I really, really do. Car, by the way, looks amazing. I'd love to see him get some sponsorship to race. But again, it looks like Justin Allgaier, Earl Bamber are the two current rumored drivers to get behind the wheel of this 3F racing organization. It'd be the first German racing team. I think this is cool and really, really awesome, in my opinion. And very happy to see it looks like we got a new German-based racing team for 2022 and maybe near the future full time. So anyway, that is going to be for today's Lawn NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel with notifications on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go jump below for that and comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think this 3F race team is going to show up or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the stories we discussed here today on the channel, like 2311 Racing looking to expand in the future? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to be having the race review for the Xfinity Series race from Michigan. And then Sunday, of course, will be the Cup Series race review for Michigan. Also, just a reminder, on this upcoming Thursday will be my first ever YouTube live stream. I'd like to have some guests on the channel. I've not exactly figured out exactly what time I'm going to do the live stream. I like doing it in the evening, maybe around 6 or 7, but I will give you guys confirmation on that when that does get revealed. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.